When the song Take Me Home Country Road hit the waves, music fans were introduced to one of the best to come from the brilliant John Denver. And for the next 20 years, the singer, songwriter, and actor was one of the most popular acoustic artists of the 70s and one of the best-selling artists in those decades. More than a belle of Edwise, Denver was a role model celebrity. However, away from the camera, the picture Denver's personality painted was so shocking that fans couldn't believe this was the same artist they loved and respected. From confessions of ex-wives to documentary reports of Denver's illegal activities, the horrible stories were truer than his fans hoped. Now, after years of speculation, the true nature of the man has finally been revealed, and it is more shocking than anyone expected. Denver was born as Henry John Deutschendorf on the last day of December in 1943. Growing up in Roswell, New Mexico, Denver had the kind of childhood a lot of boys dreamed of, a family that loved flying. His father, Captain Henry Deutschendorf Sr., was a well-known Air Force pilot who set 3 speed records in a bomber called the B-58 Hustler. The man was a hero in the military world and was even honored by being placed in the Air Force Hall of Fame. But for young Denver, the downside of this dreamy life was the unstable nature of military life. The family had to move often, living in Arizona, Alabama, and Texas within a short amount of time. Unfortunately, Denver couldn't make close friends because he never stayed in one place long enough. Just when he would start to feel settled, it will be time to move again. This left him feeling lonely, like he didn't truly belong anywhere, a feeling that stayed with him for the rest of his life. When Denver was 11 years old and living in Tucson, Arizona, his grandmother gave him a special gift, an old Gibson guitar that had been made in the year 1910. So, by the time it got to Denver's hands, it was already more than 4 decades old. This guitar became his symbol of stability, and with it, he made music that brought him comfort during some lonely times. He soon graduated singing with the Tucson, Arizona Boys Chorus, where he learned how to sing in harmony and perform in front of people. By the time he was in high school, he was already performing folk songs at small shows. Music was becoming more than just a hobby. It was how he found his place in the constantly changing world, a world that included his very strict father. Denver's father, Dutch, pushed him to be the best at everything, but Denver was a simple soul who just wanted to write songs. This made the father and son's relationship often difficult. Still, the two of them shared own deep passion, flying. When Denver learned how to fly, it gave them something they could finally enjoy together. It brought them closer. Perhaps it was the risk of the activity that reminded them of the importance of living loved ones. That same risk would later play a tragic role much later in Denver's life. For Denver, the feeling of freedom he got from flying stayed with him and often showed up in his music. After high school, Denver went to Texas Tech University to study architecture, but he quickly realized he didn't want to design buildings. He wanted to make music, so he left school and moved to Los Angeles. Around that time, he decided to change his last name. He chose Denver after the capital of Colorado because he loved the state's mountains and rivers. It felt like a fresh start. In the mid-1960s, Denver got a big break. Out of about 200 singers who auditioned, he was chosen to be the lead singer of the Jad Mitchell Trio. This was his first real chance in the music world. It gave him the opportunity to perform in front of crowds all across the country. He stayed with the group for about 2 years and recorded 3 albums. Being on stage helped him grow more confident as a singer. Life on the road was hard, but Denver soaked it all in and slowly began to find his voice. One of the most famous songs he wrote during that time was Leaving on a Jet Plane. The folk group Peter, Paul, and Mary recorded it in the late 1960s, and by the end of that decade, it became a #1 hit in the Billboard charts. Even though Denver wasn't yet a well-known solo artist, that song proved that his writing could truly connect with people. When the trio broke up, Denver didn't look back. He was already starting to climb the charts on his own. Going from a group singer to a solo star wasn't easy, but Denver made it seem like it was. His career truly took off in the early 1970s with the release of his breakthrough album, Poems, Prayers, and Promises. The song Take Me Home Country Roads became a classic, but it almost didn't happen. The first copies of the song had sound problems, and for a while it looked like it might fail. But his new manager Jerry Winrob didn't give up. He pushed radio stations, starting in Denver, Colorado, to play the song. It was released in mid-April and slowly caught on. By late August, it had reached number 2 on the Billboard Hot 100. It sold more than 1 million copies and went gold that same month. Over the years, the song stayed popular and would eventually sell more than 1.85 million digital copies in the United States alone. Its influence was so strong that the state of West Virginia made it one of their official state songs. In 1972, Denver followed up with a new album called Rocky Mountain High, which was released in September. It was his 6th album and the first to reach the top 10 in the US. It peaked at number 4 on the Billboard 200 chart. The title track Rocky Mountain High became one of his most loved songs, making it into the top 10 of the Billboard Hot 100 in the year 1973. That same year, it was ranked number 29 on the year-end chart and became a favorite among fans who loved nature and the outdoors. The album cover was taken at Slaughterhouse Falls in Aspen, Colorado, making the song even more personal to Denver. Decades later, Rocky Mountain High was named one of Colorado's 2 official state songs. The years 1974 and 1975 were Denver's most successful. In just 18 months, he had 4 songs reach number 1 on the Billboard Hot 100. Sunshine on Miss Holder's hit number 1 in March of 1974, then an Ease song followed in July. Thank God I'm a Country Boy reached the top in May of 1975, and I'm Sorry followed. In September of that same year, these songs showed the many sides of his talent. Some were gentle and hopeful, like Sunshine on My Shoulders. Others, like Thank God I'm a Country Boy, were full of energy and joy. Annie's song, which he wrote in just 10 minutes for his wife, became a classic wedding favorite. At this point, Denver was very well on the radio, on television, and in millions of homes across the country. During this golden time, he also released 3 albums that all went on number 1. Denver's Greatest Hits, released in 1973, became the best-selling album in record's history, even selling more than Elvis Presley. His album, Back Home Again, released in 1974, went triple platinum in the United States. Then in 1975, he released Wind On, which went double platinum. Together, these 3 albums proved that Denver was a true music superstar. By the end of his career, he had created about 300 songs and had written around 200 of them himself. In total, he earned 12 gold albums and 4 platinum albums. Around the world, his music sold more than 33 million copies, making him one of the most successful singer-songwriters of 1970 seconds. Denver's move into Hollywood was both surprising and successful. In 1977, he starred alongside comedy legend George Burns in the hit movie Oh God. Even though Denver had never acted before, his friendly nature and honesty won over audiences. The film, directed by Carl Reiner and based on a novel by Corman, told the story of a regular grocery store manager chosen by God to share a divine message. Denver's performance felt real and believable, making it easy for people to connect with his character. The movie became a big success, earning more than $51 million in the US and even getting an Oscar nomination for its screenplay. Although Denver didn't return for theme of his sequels, his first role showed that he could do more than just sing. He became one of the few musicians to successfully cross over into acting. Denver also became popular outside those, even when some critics didn't believe he could. His manager, Jerry Winenrob, believed it was important for Denver to connect directly with fans in other countries. So despite some doubts, Winenrob arranged a series of television specials for British audiences. He explained that since the critics would turn Denver into a star, they would go straight to the people instead. The plan worked beautifully. Denver's warm personality and clear singing voice won over viewers in Britain and helped build a strong fan base across Europe. These specials proved that television could be a powerful way to introduce artists to the world and helped make Denver an international star. His special, An Evening with John Denver, even won a Primetime Emmy Award, one of the biggest honors in television. He appeared in many other specials where he sang his songs, told stories, and performed with friends. These shows brought his music into homes across the country and around the world. Every performance felt personal, and that helped make him one of the most loved entertainers of his time. But Denver was more than just a singer. In the mid-1980s, he spoke before the US Senate. At the time, parents were asking for warning labels on music they believed was too offensive. Even though Denver was known for gentle songs, he stood up for free speech. One of his songs, Rocky Mountain High, had once been censored because people wrongly thought it was about drugs. He explained the truth and defended the right to express ideas. Many thought he would support warning labels, but he did not. That moment changed the debate around music and free speech, and its effects are still felt today. That same year, Denver became the first American artist in more than a decade to perform in the Soviet Union during the Cold War. He played concerts in 11 cities, including Moscow, Leningrad, and Tallinn. His tour was more than just music. It was about connecting with different cultures. Even people who did not understand English felt moved by his songs and message of peace. Inspired by the trip, he wrote a song called Let Us Begin, which called for peace instead of war. Recordings from that tour were released in an album called Live in Thuser. In the late 1980s, Denver returned to the Soviet Union after the Chernobyl nuclear disaster, which forced many people to leave their homes and caused serious health problems. He sang at a benefit concert in Moscow that raised a large amount of money. More funds came in from the recordings. That night wasn't about politics. It was about kindness and caring. The audience felt seen and heard. Denver showed that even known person with a guitar could make a big difference. In the early 1990s, Denver brought his music to China. After years of being closed off from the world, the Chinese people were curious about him. Songs like Country Roads were already being sung in schools. The government invited him to tour several cities, and one of his concerts was broadcast to more than 2 billion people. Some had wanted to hold the show at historic sites like the Forbidden City or the Temple of Heaven. China South welcomed him with open arms, and even the country's leader had to Canada's of Denver years before. His tour made him one of the most popular Western musicians in China at that time. Later in his life, Denver focused more on helping others. In the 1990s, he released a greatest hits album called Homegrown. All of the money from that album went to help people who were homeless. Around this time, he also helped start the World Hunger Project. For his efforts, he received the Presidential World Without Hunger Award. He was also active in environmental case, using his fame to raise awareness and support for the planet. Denver started the WinStar Foundation and also launched a project called Planted 2000, which focused on planting trees and rebuilding forests. His charity work became just as important to him as his music, but his personal life was full of pain. His marriage to Annie Martel began like a dream. They adopted 2 children together, and Denver even wrote Teeny's song for her in just 10 minutes, but as his fame grew, so did the problems in their relationship. Annie often felt invisible and lost in his head. By the early 1980s, they decided divorce. What followed was messy and painful. Though Denver was usually gentle in public, he behaved very differently in private. Reports said he became angry and unpredictable. The divorce was bitter and heartbreaking. One day, after Annie cut down some of his favorite oak trees at their home in Aspen, Denver lost control. Instead of forgiving, he showed up with a chainsaw and cut their furniture into pieces. He even sawed their bed in half. It was a shocking moment, a dark symbol of a marriage that had fallen apart. Friends and witnesses could hardly believe this was the same soft-spoken singer they knew. Yet Denver had been the one to file for divorce. The court papers told a story of abuse that damaged his clean, wholesome image. Friends supported Annie's side, and even some of Denver's former managers admitted he had a dark temper. Though Annie stayed quiet after the divorce, the damage to Denver's reputation was already done. Many people who once admired him began to see him in a very different light. Denver first met Australian singer and actress Cassandra Delaney in the mid-1980s at a hotel in Sydney. He was performing in the hotel bar and was immediately attracted to her. Their romance moved quickly. By the late 1982, they had a beautiful mountain wedding with close friends and family. It looked like a fairy tale, but from the beginning there were problems. Cassandra later said that being with a famous man was very hard. Denver was much older than her. His fame followed them everywhere, and his mood could change suddenly. To the public, they looked perfect, but behind closed doors, things were tense. In the late 1980s, their daughter Jessie was born. Denver had believed for years that he could not have children because of an illness he had had as a child. Jessie's birth felt like a miracle. Some people even wondered if they used medical help to have her. After Jessie was born, Denver became more controlling. Cassandra felt them grow jealous and distant. Their fragile relationship began to fall apart. In the mid-1990s, Cassandra gave an interview to an Australian magazine. She described Denver as someone who had no true friends. Staff were afraid of him. Secretaries often cried and quit to the world. He seemed gentle, but Cassandra said this was only an act. In private, he was often angry and harsh. She said he drank a lot, yelled at her, and tried to control her life. She stayed quiet for a long time, hoping he would change, but nothing helped. They separated in the early 1990s, and the divorce was final a couple of years later. The legal battle was harsh. Denver sued Cassandra for several $1 million and accused her of making him look foolish. Cassandra fought to keep custody of Jesse. Denver later wrote about this in his book. The divorce hurt him deeply. After that, he was never quite the same. In the mid-1990s, he released his autobiography, Take Me Home. It shocked many fans. He wrote about using cannabis, LSD, and cocaine. He also admitted to cheating on both of his wives. Even his first marriage to Annie Emerald, which inspired the song Annie's Song, had been filled with affairs. He wrote that he sometimes acted more violently than he should have. One story stood out. He once used a chainsaw to cut a bed in half during a fight. His clean image was broken. Fans saw a side of him they had never imagined. Denver to be one of America's most popular singer-songwriters in the 1970s. He reached the top of the music charts and won the hearts of millions with his soft voice and acoustic style. His record company RCA supported him through 25 albums, including 13 that went gold and 8 that went platinum. His greatest hits album became the best-selling record ever had. But by the middle of the 1980s, things started to change. Music styles were shifting toward heavy synthesizers and drum machines, and Denver's sound no longer fit in. In 1986, after RCA was sold to General Electric, the company decided to save money and focus on newer artists. Even though Denver had a long and successful story with them, they let him go. He was shocked. He had just finished what thought would be his next album with him called One World, and believer knowing his contract was guaranteed. Instead, RCA chose to move on, thinking they could earn more money from other artists. Denver said they had taken him for granted even after all the profile had brought them over the years. With no other label willing to take him on, he had to release his next albums through his own label, Windstar. It was a tough lesson that even big stars can be left behind when music trends and business goals change. Over the years, Denver spent more than 20,000 hours flying. He earned licenses to fly single-engine planes, multi-engine planes, gliders, and even lighter-than-air aircraft. But in the 1990s, his personal struggles began to catch up with him. Denver was arrested for driving under the influence not just once but twice. The Federal Aviation Administration, which requires pilots to have a valid medical certificate to prove they are fit to fly, took action. After his second arrest, they refused to renew his medical certificate. Without that certificate, his pilot's license meant nothing. To get it back, he would have had to prove that he no longer had a drinking problem. But he never completed that process. Flying had once been his greatest joy, but now even that was taken from him. What made it worse was how he responded to the FAA's orders. When they sent him certified letters demanding that he give up his medical certificate, he either ignored them or sent them back unopened. Legally, this created a loophole. Because he never accepted the letters, the FAA could not complete the process to revoke his license. So on paper, he could still fly, but not because he was actually fit. It was only because the system depended on his cooperation. That loophole finally closed in March of 1997. Denver signed for one of the FAA certified letters, which meant they could officially ground him. From that moment on, every flight he took was illegal. Getting back his flying status would have required proving his sobriety and meeting all the rules he had ignored for years, but Denver chose not to do it. Still, none of this stopped him from flying. On October 12, 1997, he took out a small experimental aircraft he had just bought. He was practicing takeoffs and landings near Terry, California. He had owned the plane for only one day and had spent just about half an hour with an instructor before flying it alone. The plane had been heavily modified and was difficult to operate. One major problem was the fuel sector valve. It had been moved to a hard-to-reach spot behind the pilot's left shoulder. To switch tanks, Denver had to twist in his seat and reach back awkwardly. The valve was stiff and often needed pliers to turn. The fuel gauges were also behind him, so he couldn't tread them easily. He needed a handheld meter to check them, and even then, their readings were not clear. That morning, while flying near Terry Peninsula Airport, he used up the fuel in the left tank while practicing takeoffs and landings. Witnesses heard the engine sputter and then go silent. As the fuel ran out, Denver tried to switch to the right tank. To do that, he had to reach behind him and use pliers to turn the valve. During that process, he accidentally pressed the right rudder pedal. The plane's nose dipped sharply down, and within seconds, it crashed into the Pacific Ocean. Denver was killed instantly. Investigators from the National Transportation Safety Board found that Denver had started the flight with too little fuel, only about 3 gallons in one tank and 6 in the other. They said his unfamiliarity with plane was a major reason for the crash. They also pointed out the unsafe design changes that made switching fuel tanks in mid-flight nearly impossible. Even though Denver was a skilled pilot, he had not properly prepared for flying this plane. The report made it clear the crash could have been avoided if Denver had refueled, trained more, or flown a plane with a safer fuel system. The accident might never have happened. His final flight was a sad reminder of how small mistakes and ignored warnings can lead to a tragic end. Denver's death in the late 1990s was not just a tragedy, it was a wake-up call. While millions of fans mourned the loss of a beloved folk singer, the crash also revealed a more complicated side of his personal life. Denver's deep love for flying sometimes crossed the line into risky behavior. He was known to perform glider tricks with the engine off and totally even when he didn't have the proper medical approval. These actions showed a pattern of pushing limits, sometimes in unsafe ways. Even after the aviation authorities warned him many times and took away his medical certificate, he kept flying. The crash also showed a number of poor choices: flying with little fuel, using a plane with known design problems, and flying alone without filing a flight plan. These decisions were not random. They were part of a larger pattern of risky behavior that ended in tragedy. Although no drugs or alcohol were found in his body after the crash, his earlier arrests for driving under the influence and a crash in the mid-1990s when he had been drinking had already damaged his reputation. Still, despite these flaws, Denver's legacy has stayed strong. His music continues to touch people all over the world with its messages of peace, love for the earth, and deep emotion. Songs like Take Me Home, Country Roads, Annie's Song, and Rocky Mountain High are still loved today as classics of folk and country music. He was also one of the first famous musicians to make caring for the environment a big part of his work, long before it became a common cause. In the end, people choose to remember John Denver for his deep connection to both nature and music rather than for the poor choices he made in life. His 15 feet bronze statue on display at Red Rocks Amphitheater Puflicti reminds fans of the greatness of the man who traveled those country roads.